Hello, and welcome back to Podfinder. My name is Philip, and I'm here to talk about Pathfinder 1st Edition. Today's video is the fourth in the Merry Little Sinmas, my sequel series to last year's 12 Days of Sinmas. And if you don't know what that means, I suggest checking out the playlists in the description. Basically, over a 7-week period, I'm covering the story of the Rune Lords of Thassilon in the Age of Lost Omens, preparing players and GMs for Revenge of the Rune Lords. Today's video is another summary of the events of a Paizo AP, in this case the dungeon-crawling classic Shattered Star, the second entry in the Rune Lords trilogy of APs. My goal here is to get you and your game group caught up on the lore of Thassilon and Varisia so you can jump right in to the new Revenge of the Rune Lords mythic adventure path. I said this in the introduction to this series, but these videos aren't intended to examine every possible nook and cranny in these APs, merely to cover the important events, major players, and prominent locations explored within. If your group has the time and interest, I definitely suggest playing through the whole Rune Lords series, but I recognize that that isn't even remotely feasible for most groups. For those of you with better things to do with your time, or who simply need a little lore refresh, I put together these summaries. Before that, though, if you enjoy this video and want to hear more Pathfinder lore, consider subscribing or commenting below. Or, if you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon. Just $2 a month gets you access to all my scripts, as well as the audio files for all of my videos, all of which drop at least a week early. Let me begin with something which should be obvious. Spoiler alert. This video actively spoils major plot points in the Shattered Star adventure path, and may reference information in the Rise of the Rune Lords AP or the Year of the Risen Rune material I covered earlier in this series. Do not watch this video if you intend to play or read those products and need to remain spoiler-free. Additionally, this video, and the others in this series, assumes you've seen my 12 Days of Sinmas series. I'll be assuming a basic knowledge of the material covered in those videos, mainly to avoid retreading ground I've covered before. Alright, with that out of the way, let's dig in. Backstory and Prelude. Shattered Star, published in 2012, was something of a milestone for Paizo, as it simultaneously marked their 11th official Pathfinder adventure path, 10 years of Paizo existing as a company, and 5 years of Pathfinder existing as a system. To mark these achievements, Shattered Star was conceived of as a celebration of the roots of Pathfinder and tabletop RPGs more broadly. The story for Shattered Star is explicitly written as a sequel to Rise of the Rune Lords, Curse of the Crimson Throne, and Second Darkness, with the main plot being motivated by an in-universe desire to respond to the events of those APs. Additionally, the AP is designed mechanically as a celebration of dungeon crawling as a campaign framework. Rather than being a single mega-dungeon, however, each of the 6 books in Shattered Star is structured as its own dungeon. This allows the PCs to experience a variety of dungeon themes spread all across Varisia, rather than limiting them to one locale, like you see in Abomination Vaults or Seven Dooms. Getting to the actual backstory for the campaign, Shattered Star is structured like a treasure hunt, with the PCs pursuing the 7 shards of the legendary Sihedron artifact. As a brief reminder, the Sihedron artifact was a powerful magical item forged by Old Lord Zin, the founder of ancient Thassilon. After appointing the 7 Rune Lords as masters of each of the 7 schools of rune magic, Zin desired to demonstrate his mastery over all schools. To do this, he forged the Sihedron artifact, a 7-pointed star made from the 7 sky metals. The device would serve as his impenetrable defense, and ensured that even his 7 apprentices together lacked the power to face him. But, of course, Zin's greatest defense was also one of his greatest power sources. As he aged, his body declined, and he began to desperately search for a means of creating a new vessel for his soul. He eventually succeeded in crafting the Clockwork Reliquary. To transfer his soul into the reliquary, Zin temporarily dismantled the Sihedron artifact, so it might power his attempted ritual. This, however, was the opportunity the 7 Rune Lords had been waiting for, and they moved against him in that moment. Recognizing the betrayal of his former students, Zin made a snap decision. He detonated his prepared arcane ritual, destroying his assassin and vaporizing his body. His soul, however, became bound to the Sihedron. The Rune Lords, investigating the explosion, discovered their master's bound soul and correctly surmised that reassembling the Sihedron artifact would restore Zin to life, at least partially. To prevent this, the Rune Lords each took one of the 7 shards of the Sihedron artifact. Over the remainder of Thassilonian history, the 7 Rune Lords would slowly attempt to steal one another's Sihedron shards, to varying degrees of success. After Earthfall, much of the history and knowledge of the artifact was lost, and the association between it and Zin's soul was forgotten completely. Only the attempted return of Karzug in 4707 AR, during the events of Rise of the Rune Lords, did meaningful interest in the Sihedron flare back to life. And that is where our story begins. Book 1. Shards of Sin. Before I can begin the campaign proper, I need to do a little book-specific setup. In the ancient days of Thassilon, Runelord Elasnist proved the most successful when it came to stealing Sihedron shards. She managed to steal not only the Shard of Greed, but the Shard of Pride as well. Determined to research them and unlock their secrets, she sent them to one of her many arcane laboratories near the southern end of the mighty Irespan Bridge for further study. Here, they remained for thousands of years, until an unsuspecting thief named Natalia stumbled into the ruins of the ancient lab and laid her hands on the Shard of Pride, falling victim to its curse. Shattered Star kicks off in 4713 AR in Magnamar, the regional capital of southwestern Varissia. The adventure begins when the PCs, whom we'll refer to as the Sihedron Heroes, receive an invitation from one Sheila Hydemarch, a venture captain in the Pathfinder Society and the founder of the recently established PFS Lodge in Magnamar. Arriving at the Magnamar Lodge, the PCs, who are already members of the PFS, are greeted by Sheila Hydemarch herself, alongside the accomplished Pathfinder field agent Koraya Asmarin. After some simple introductions, Hydemarch gives the PCs their first assignment. One of her agents, a woman named Natalia Van Kaskerkin, recently dropped some hints that she was on the trail of some unknown but valuable artifact, whose origins traced back to ancient Thassilon. Natalia, however, has since failed to return. It's up to the PCs to find her and recover the artifact. Beginning their investigations in the lower neighborhoods of Magnamar, the PCs soon learn that Natalia was a member of a local Zarni gang called the Tower Girls. The Tower Girls themselves are also looking for Natalia, and the PCs are forced to race them to Natalia's supposed hideout in the Underbridge district. There, they face and defeat Natalia, discovering the ancient treasure she'd acquired, a strange pointed piece of sky metal. Returning to the Magnamarian Lodge, the PCs meet with Captain Hydemarch, who informs the PCs of the true nature of what they hold. The artifact they've found is nothing less than the Shard of Pride, one of the 7 shards of the legendary Sihedron, a magical artifact created by the mythical First Emperor Zin himself. She demonstrates the nature of the item by merging it with an Aeon Stone, suppressing the curse of the shard which had infected Natalia's mind and driven her to abandon her allies, thus allowing the PCs to gain an innate understanding of the shard's abilities. Beyond that, however, Sheila informs the PCs of the importance of their discovery to broader Varissia. If the PFS and the PCs can gather the remaining shards and reassemble them into the full Sihedron artifact, then they will have constructed a potent defense against the rising machinations of the Rune Lords. She reminds the heroes of the many dangers presented by ancient Thassilonian magics even in just the last 5 years, calling to mind the events of Rise of the Rune Lords, Curse of the Crimson Throne, and Second Darkness. Thus motivated, the PCs begin their quest by concentrating their minds on the Shard of Pride. The 7 shards of the Sihedron bear an eldritch connection to one another, even after 10 millennia of separation. And this connection allows the PCs a glimpse of the next shard in the sequence, the Shard of Greed. Luckily for the heroes, they discover that the Shard of Greed is supposedly located nearby, in one of the ancient pilings of the massive Irespan Bridge. Called the Crow, this piling is decorated with intricate avian carvings, and is known to hold at least a small internal chamber, which is sometimes used as a dock for fishing boats. Entering the Crow, the heroes discover that the Tower Girls, the gang to which Natalia Van Kaskerken had belonged until recently, have just as recently set up shop here, and have no interest in allowing access to the PCs. In truth, it was in exploring the Crow as a potential new home for her gang that Natalia had discovered the Shard of Greed in the first place. That Natalia had discovered the Shard of Pride in the first place. Facing off against the Tower Girls, the heroes eventually fight their way into the Crow's upper halls, and discover a hidden staircase leading into the deepest levels of the structure. In the depths, the PCs begin to explore a hidden ancient lab, awakening failed experiments, extraplanar holdovers from the days of Thassilon, and undead monsters. They even confront a group of Darklands denizens who have tunneled into the facility from below in recent years, having occupied and repaired the site to begin conducting their own vile experiments. Overcoming these dangers, the heroes eventually succeed in locating the Shard of Greed. They also succeed in making an even more valuable discovery, however, an ancient altar Elasnist had constructed to aid her in the reconstruction of the Sihedron, should she ever manage to collect all 7 pieces. More successful than they could have dreamed, the heroes return to Sheila Hydemarch to report back. Upon making their report, the heroes also conduct the ritual to learn the location of the next shard in the sequence, the Shard of Lust. Envisioning it, the heroes receive a mental image of an immense stone statue on the southwestern shores of Varisia, the famous Lady's Light. Book 2, Curse of the Lady's Light. As one of the original 7 Rune Lords, Sorshin, Rune Lord of Lust, always maintained a healthy fear of old Lord Zin, and never considered for a moment reassembling the Sihedron artifact. For that reason, she never stole one of the other 7 shards, and was content to keep hers secure in the Lady's Light, a monolithic statue of herself which served as her second home, in the western half of ancient Eurythnia. When Sorshin was away, management of the Lady's Light fell to Sorshin's steward, the succubus Ayandamala. After the Earthfall calamity, however, Sorshin and her fellow Rune Lords fell into stasis, and Ayandamala found herself permanently bound to the Lady's Light, with no reprieve from what appeared to be an eternity of boring guard duty. After much searching, however, the succubus found a single desperate escape. She could transfer the guardianship of the Lady's Light and the Shard of Lust to a blood relative, and it just so happened that one of her own daughters, an Aludemon named Ashimintalu, served in the bowels of the tower. Tricking her own daughter, Ayandamala escaped her bondage, leaving Ashimintalu bound for an eternity to the Lady's Light. Ashimintalu, unable to leave the site, soon became infected by the curse of the Shard of Lust, and fell into a madness from which she would never recover. After thousands of years, she eventually became convinced that she was none other than Sorshin herself, and used her demonic powers to take on the form of the long-lost Rune Lord. Ashimintalu might have remained alone for all time had it not been for the timely arrival of a group of warrior women from Korvosa. After the defeat of Queen Iliosa during the events of the Curse of the Crimson Throne adventure path, many of her elite warriors, the Grey Maidens, dispersed into small mercenary companies. Some, like the Scarlet Rose Company, became champions of redemption and goodness. Others, however, stayed on the path of evil. One such company was led by a woman named Oriana, who sought to recover the ancient magics of Sorshin to avenge Iliosa's death. She led her followers to the Lady's Light in search of these artifacts, where they were confronted by Ashimintalu and ensnared by her magic and her impersonation of Sorshin. The next chapter in Shattered Star kicks off when the Sihedron heroes set out for the Lady's Light in pursuit of the next shard of the Sihedron. They enter the Mushfens, a dangerous swamp which runs along the southern coast of Varisia. There, they face off against several threats, most prominently tribes of troglodytes and boggards, before eventually gaining access to the dungeons beneath the Lady's Light. Once in the dungeons, the heroes begin to clear out the threats within, some of which were ancient and others of which had been gathered more recently by Ashimintalu. One such threat was a trap, which has become somewhat infamous in the Pathfinder community: a suspended clone body of Runelord Sorshan infused with magic. That magic, once triggered, would target whoever attempted to damage the body and kill them. Over the centuries, however, the magic had degraded, and now had the unintentional result of destroying the body of the target, then implanting their mind directly into the Sorshan clone. So it's entirely possible that, after Book 2, one of the Sihedron heroes would have been running around in a body identical to that of Runelord Sorshan. I absolutely love this trap, but I would definitely have a quick conversation with my players about their consent limits before implementing this. This trap ultimately connects to a campaign background in Return of the Runelords a few years down the line. The climb through the Lady's Light does a pretty good job in revealing aspects of Sorshan's personality to the heroes. Her chambers shed light upon her commanding and domineering personality, but also upon her intense academic focus and undeniable magical genius. The heroes even discover evidence of Sorshan's genuine interest in and devotion to Nocticula, a fact which foreshadows her eventual redemption. Ascending through the levels of the Lady's Light, the heroes eventually fought the Grey Maidens who had pledged themselves to Ashamintalu, whom they thought was Sorshan returned. Whether these Grey Maidens are killed or allowed to flee is in many ways up to the heroes. They eventually confront Oriana herself, and the young captain laments her decision to align with the so-called Sorshan. She begs the heroes to allow her and her remaining warriors to flee, then points them in the direction of her former mistress. At the pinnacle of the Lady's Light, the heroes finally come face to face with Ashamintalu, in the guise of Sorshan. Ashamintalu, the heroes discover, has slipped entirely into delusion in the millennia since her entrapment. She fully believes that she is the reincarnation of Sorshan herself, and is incapable of accepting the sad truth of her existence. The heroes can exploit this instability if they so choose, but must fight Ashamintalu regardless of their chosen approach. Only upon defeating her do they gain access to her greatest treasure, the Shard of Lust. Enacting the ritual taught to them by Sheila Hydemarch, they gain a vision of the location of the next shard in the sequence, the Shard of Gluttony. In their mind's eye, they see a vision of a strange hexagonal city on the edge of an enormous cliff. Kaer Maga, the City of Strangers. Book 3. The Asylum Stone. During the days of ancient Thassilon, Runelord Karzug, the final Runelord of Greed, was among the most belligerent of the 7 ruling archwizards in the Empire. After his own Shard of Greed was stolen by a Lasnist, he was swift to respond by stealing the Shard of Gluttony from his neighbor, Zutha. Determined not to allow such a powerful artifact to be stolen again, Karzug chose a particularly cunning hiding place. He entered the subterranean caverns beneath the mysterious city of Kaer Maga, and struck a deal with a bizarre entity known only as the Dark Rider, who made his home in a strange forest outside of the material plane. The Dark Rider took the shard and allowed its inherent magic to infuse his domain, and he remains its guardian into the Age of Lost Omens, even as Karzug himself has vanished from the world of the living. The Sihedron heroes begin their quest for the Shard of Gluttony by sailing up the Yondabakari River. This river, which runs much of the length of southern Varissia, allows the heroes to travel directly from Magnamar to the falls beneath Kaer Maga itself, and Sheila Hydemarch arranges for an enchanted riverboat to carry them the whole way. Along with this aid, Hydemarch tells them about a recent report from Pathfinder agent Eando Klein about a recent discovery he made within the walls of Kaer Maga, a rare and ancient Aeon stone dating back to the Thassilonian period. For those who recall last week's video in this series, the name of Eando Klein should probably ring a bell. Arriving at the base of the Storval Plateau, the heroes were then forced to climb the Half-Light Path, an underground passageway which led up the cliffs of the Storval Plateau to the entrance to the city proper. While fast, the Half-Light Path is considered dangerous, and the PCs are forced to fight for their lives against the Darklands denizens who seek to prey upon them on the way up. Finally arriving in Kaer Maga, the heroes are confronted by a less immediate but nonetheless daunting challenge. They have no idea where the Shard of Gluttony actually is. The visions which guide them toward the next shard are vague, and provide no useful information beyond the fact that the shard exists somewhere in or beneath the city. The heroes then begin navigating the complex political and economic landscape of the City of Secrets. Kaer Maga is a city filled with 1,000 factions, each one more mysterious and dangerous than the last. Blood-filled bloat mages, monks devoted to Erastil, Shoanti mystics, oracles of unknown origin, and many more bizarre sights fill the covered streets of the city. Mystery and intrigue abound. That's my way of saying that if your GM was feeling particularly creative, this is where they could add a bunch of off-the-wall side quests. The heroes eventually earn the gratitude of a troll augur, who points them in the direction of an ancient library within the city, called the Thoracic Spire. Arriving at the spire, the heroes are greeted by one of the librarians as soon as they mention the Sahedron Shard of Gluttony. The librarians usher the PCs inside their fortress, urgently explaining their current predicament. The librarians of the Thoracic Spire, called the Council of Truth, have for years been in contact with a mysterious race of alien beings living beneath Kaer Maga, the hive mind species known since ancient times as the Cullborn. The Cullborn were a powerful people, and were capable of sharing arcane and eldritch secrets well beyond the librarians' normal understanding. In the weeks leading up to Shattered Star, however, the Cullborn reached out and informed the Council of Truth of a powerful and dangerous secret: the presence of the Shard of Gluttony and the Dark Forest beneath Kaer Maga. Eager to recover such a powerful artifact, the Council sent a party of adventurers into the depths. But by the time of the arrival of the Sahedron heroes at the Thoracic Spire, the hired adventurers had failed to report back, and the librarians had begun to grow worried. Desperate for a resolution, the librarians strike a bargain with the heroes. They will grant the heroes access to the caverns below Kaer Maga via a secret passageway beneath the spire, and in return, the heroes will seek out the previous party of adventurers and resolve any lingering conflicts in the depths. The heroes, recognizing an opportunity for what it is, descend into the caverns below the city, quickly discovering the ancient Thassilonian workshops established by Karzug and his predecessors. It doesn't take long for the heroes to discover the fate of the previous group of adventurers. Of the two who remained alive, both had been driven mad by the lingering eldritch horrors in the arcane laboratories. The heroes eventually make contact with the Cullborn, who make good on their promise to grant access to the Dark Forest via an artifact called the Black Menhir. Entering the Dark Forest, the heroes begin to explore the Black Keep, the fortress of the Rider. After centuries housing the Shard of Gluttony, the whole realm had become infused with gluttonous magic, resulting in numerous necromantic enemies and traps for the heroes to overcome. This effect was entirely intentional on the part of the Rider, as he had devised some strange eldritch engine tied to the essence of his realm which drew in the Shard's power and actively terramorphed his forest. Eventually, the Sahedron heroes face off against the Dark Rider, a creature of legend whose annual midnight rides inspired numerous legends across Avestan. Overcoming this threat, the heroes manage to recover the Shard of Gluttony and make their escape from the Dark Forest. As they return to the material plane, however, the heroes are confronted one last time by a single remaining challenge: the Cullborn. The terrifying hive mind beings make a final desperate play for the Shard, breaking their word and attacking the heroes in their moment of weakness. Only after a hard-fought victory are the heroes able to make a desperate escape from the darkness and return to the relative safety of Kaer Maga. Relative, of course, being the operative word. Performing the ritual on the Shard of Gluttony, the heroes catch a glimpse of the location of their next target: an isolated religious compound on the shores of the Varisian Gulf, a site known throughout Varisia as Windsong Abbey. Book 4: Beyond the Doomsday Door. In a world of many gods, like Golarion, religious orders devoted to one god or another were, and are, fairly common. But active cooperation between faiths, especially large numbers of faiths, was less frequent, and even more especially without interference from secular political authorities. This was the motivation behind the establishment of Windsong Abbey on the Varisian frontier in 4082 AR. Windsong Abbey was a site intended to house priests of every major religion in the Inner Sea region, including all the core 20 deities except Rovagug. This included priests of Aroden, as the abbey was founded well before Aroden's death. Followers of essentially all religions were welcome within the abbey's walls, though no more than one priest of any faith would be allowed to stay long-term. The collaboration of the priests was maintained for more than 5 centuries and proved highly fruitful, resulting in the Windsong Testaments, a series of religious writings detailing aspects of the creation and ordering of the universe. It is from these testaments that we, the out-of-universe audience, derive our understanding of the most commonly accepted origin story for the Pathfinder universe. This productive cooperation was violently disrupted in 4606 AR with the death of Aroden and the collapse of prophecy. The death of prophecy caused the downfall of many priests, mostly followers of Aroden, but also many priests of Pharasma, who was herself a goddess of fate and prophecy. One such priest was an elf named Ardathanatus, who was a priest of Pharasma at Windsong Abbey. Unable to process the death of prophecy, Ardathanatus suffered a total mental breakdown and went on a killing spree, slaughtering the priestess of Iomedae, the goddess he blamed for the death of Aroden. He then fled, leaving the abbey and the small village which had grown up around it devastated. Over the next 100 years, Windsong Abbey continued at a hindered pace, but Ardathanatus only sank deeper into his delusions. He eventually made his way to Hollow Mountain, the former capital of Bakrakhan. Deep within the heart of Hollow Mountain, Ardathanatus came into contact with the faith of the Qliphoth lord Yamasoth, Rune Lord Elasnist's own patron deity, and a god of flesh-warping and transformation. Disillusioned with his former faith, Ardathanatus took quickly to the faith of the Polymorph Plague, and developed a new goal: to unite with his new god in its divine realm of Sekitar Seractus. The Twisted Elf was further corrupted by an object he found within Hollow Mountain, the Shard of Envy. Elasnist had managed to steal one more Sihedron shard in the dying days of Thassilon, and had hidden it away in the depths of her fortress. The curse of the Shard of Envy slowly took root in Ardathanatus's mind, and twisted his thoughts back toward Windsong Abbey. These thoughts combined with the elf's new goal when he remembered an important fact about Windsong Abbey. It existed above a former temple to Grotus, the god of the apocalypse, and this temple contained a Doomsday door. In the ancient days of Thassilon, Grotus had only been worshipped by dedicated End Times cultists, and one such cult established a hidden temple near the Rasp between Shalast and Bakrakhan. Deep within the hidden subterranean chambers lied a powerful artifact dedicated to their god, a Doomsday door. A Doomsday door is a doorway which, when unlocked, would unleash a wave of destruction and bring about a localized mini-apocalypse. The intention of the Doomsday door was to aid in the bringing about of the end of the world, and thus speed along the end times and bring Grotus's goals to fruition. Recalling this Doomsday door, Ardathanatus solidified his plan. He would gather an army and seize Windsong Abbey, taking his rightful place as the head of the abbey from those who cast him out. He would then repurpose the Doomsday door to grant him access to Sekitar Seractus and a chance to join with his new god. With this plan in place, Ardathanatus began his execution. He gathered a force of giants, sin-spawn, and evil fae, then attacked Windsong Abbey. The abbey and the town around it fell quickly, but not without the chance for word to get out. A Varisian traveler witnessed the destruction of the town and escaped to Sandpoint. At the same time, the Desnan priest within the abbey, a man named Casimir, contacted his daughter via magic. This daughter, the Pathfinder agent Koraya, whom the PCs met back in Book 1, arrived at the abbey a week later, but was captured. The fall of Windsong Abbey occurred while the Sihedron heroes were traveling to and exploring Kaer Maga, and by the time they'd collected the Shard of Gluttony, the abbey was firmly under Ardathanatus's control, though he had yet to succeed in opening the Doomsday door. The Sahedron heroes likely begin their approach to Windsong Abbey in the nearby town of Sandpoint, where they can hear rumors of the Abbey's fall from that same Varisian traveler I mentioned a moment ago. Traveling up the coast to the Abbey, the heroes are quickly set upon by hill giants and Ettins, the security forces which Ardathanatus has left to control the surface-level ruins of the Abbey. Advancing into the ruins, the heroes make two important discoveries. The first is the location of Casimir, the priest of Desna, who locked himself within the magically fortified lighthouse on the cliffside. The second is the petrified form of Koraya, under the guard of a Medusa loyal to Ardathanatus. Freeing these two allies, the heroes clear the ruins of danger, at which point Casimir fills them in on the events of the Abbey's fall and confirms that Ardathanatus carried a large piece of metal on his person, which matches the description of the Shard of Envy. The heroes also pilfer a powerful tool which will aid in their exploration, a Doomsday key, which grants them access to the many locked chambers in the Groton Temple below. From here, the adventure becomes another dungeon crawl, with the heroes descending into the labyrinthine Groton Temple under the Windsong Abbey. They clear rooms, disarm traps, and defeat mini-bosses, working their way ever downward. They learn that one of the Abbey's priests, Zolarim, the cleric of Nethys, allied with Ardathanatus and has aided in the attempted opening of the Doomsday door. They also discover that several of the former worshippers of Grotus from Thassilonian times have risen to oppose them as undead horrors allied with Ardathanatus. Reaching the innermost sanctum of the temple, the heroes finally confront Ardathanatus at the threshold of the Doomsday door. The door itself is only slightly ajar at this point, allowing limited access to Secatar Seractus, but failing to fully unleash the horrors of the Outer Rifts. During this fight, the dark god Yamasoth is able to reach into the material plane with his tentacles, but he is sealed away when Ardathanatus is defeated and his ritual is disrupted. The heroes then succeed in claiming the Shard of Envy for themselves, bringing them to a total of 5 shards so far. Book 5. Into the Nightmare Rift. During the days of Thassilon, the mighty Rune Lord Karzug maintained a large number of arcane and eldritch laboratories throughout his kingdom. The greatest of these was, undoubtedly, Gilt Spur. Gilt Spur was an imposing place, a crystalline pillar which projected into the skies in the foothills of the Kodor Mountains. What made it special, however, was not its construction or its location, but the mystical connection it had with the nightmare realm of Leng. Gilt Spur had been built around a naturally occurring planar connection to the dimension of dreams, which Karzug and his minions used to open a portal to Leng, a realm infused with strange eldritch energies and filled with intelligent beings ready to share their secrets. Gilt Spur, then, became an embassy between Shalast and Leng. Karzug appointed an accomplished priestess of Lissala named Mesmalatu as the head of the facility. Mesmalatu managed the operations at Gilt Spur for several years, until Earthfall, when Karzug retreated into his Runewell dimension, and his followers were left to fend for themselves. The tectonic activity kicked off by the Earthfall meteor triggered a series of volcanic eruptions in the Kodor Mountains, and the lava flow from one of these eruptions almost entirely buried Gilt Spur, sealing Mesmalatu and her underlings away. For her part, Mesmalatu made the best of a bad situation, and retreated through the portal into Leng, though the portal itself collapsed behind her. Now trapped in the Nightmare Realm, she set herself to the task of learning. She transformed herself into a lich, and abandoned her faith in Lissala in favor of Nyarlathotep. She then began absorbing as much knowledge from the denizens of Leng as she could. Only centuries later did she reconstruct the portal and return to Gilt Spur, reasserting her control over the now underground complex, and converting it to her personal eldritch research station. One of the artifacts to which she had access was the Shard of Sloth, another Sahedron shard stolen by Karzug. Years wore on into centuries and eventually millennia, however, and slowly Mesmalatu decayed into a demi-lich. Life, or unlife, in Gilt Spur became very quiet for many years. In recent years, the mighty blue dragon Kadrakasta came across an unexpected find in an ancient Thassilonian ruin in Belkzen, the Shard of Wrath. How the shard had been stolen by Zutha from Alasnist remains the topic of speculation, but in the Great Wyrm's hands, the shard became a powerful tool. Kadrakasta became obsessed with the shard and devised the means of tracking down the next shard in the sequence. That led her to the lava field on the Storval Plateau, and she soon discovered the nature of the mysterious crystal pillar protruding from the ground. Using her magic and might, she compelled several groups of giants to begin an enormous excavation project, freeing Giltspur from the rock. After gaining access to the uppermost levels of Giltspur, Kadrakasta took flight and sped into the depths in search of her prize. In her haste, however, she left behind her own Shard of Wrath, which was taken up by the leader of the hill giants who remained outside. Book 5 begins when the Sihedron heroes use the Shard of Envy to divine the location of the next shard in the sequence, the Shard of Wrath. Confusingly, the vision leads them not into Hollow Mountain, or another location in what was once Bakrakhan, but back to the Storval Plateau in what was once Shalast. Following the visions, the heroes eventually discover a strange sight out on the plains, a mixed collection of hill and fire giants excavating what looks like an immense crystal pillar, partly buried in the earth. Compelled by their quest, the heroes confront the giants and gain access to the lava tubes below the surface. Within these tunnels, the heroes face and defeat the war chief Jubek and claim his Shard of Wrath for themselves. Surprisingly, when they activate the ritual to discern the location of the final shard, they discover that the Shard of Sloth is alarmingly close by, hidden within a veil of darkness inside Giltspur. Stealing their resolve, the heroes enter Giltspur in search of their final treasure. Within the facility, the heroes are plagued by visions of the nightmare realm of Leng, at first only when they sleep, but with increasing frequency during their waking hours as they advance toward their goal. They soon discover the key to many of Giltspur's strange properties, a portion of the interdimensional Dreaming Tower, which manifested in this area in the days of Thassilon. It was about this tower fragment that Giltspur was constructed, and the dimensional thinness it created allowed for the connection to Leng. While much of the original laboratory space that the heroes discover remains dedicated to eldritch research, they also come across many places corrupted by the influence of Leng and populated by strange entities made of nightmares and tentacles. Several spaces they enter are consecrated to the outer god Nyarlathotep, though only later would they learn that this had largely been at the behest of Mesmalatu. Within Giltspur, the heroes encounter an underground lake and fight a powerful aquatic monster named Ognathuga, the same manner of creature as the Black Maga from Rise of the Runelords. Cute little callback there, I like that. After that, the heroes are confronted by a drow priestess of Zura named Jaivanshi, who is seeking the Shard of Lust to complete a ritual and transform herself into a vampire, per the edicts of her dark goddess. The heroes briefly ally with Jaivanshi to continue their quest uncontested, and make their way deeper underground. They eventually defeat Mesmalatu herself, though by this time the Demi-Lich had lost sight of any clear goal or desire. Leaving Mesmalatu behind, the heroes take a dangerous step on their journey by passing through the portal in Giltspur's depths and moving into Leng. The heroes enter Leng by passing through a temple to Nyarlathotep, overcoming Leng ghouls and their moon beast masters, alongside other dangerous threats native to the Nightmare Realm. Finally, the Sihedron heroes emerge from the temple and come face to face with Kadrakasta. The dragon demands that the PCs hand over their shards, and when they refuse, she attacks. After a grueling contest, the Sihedron heroes emerge victorious and claim the 7th and final shard of the Sihedron artifact. After making their way back to the material plane and dealing with Jaivanshi and her minions, they have a chance to return to Magnamar and reassemble the mightiest artifact Thassilon ever produced. Book 6: The Dead Heart of Zin. During Earthfall, the Isle of Zin sank beneath the waves of the rising Varisian Gulf. The ghost of the first Emperor Zin, still tied to the ruins of his crystalline palace, was lost to the surface world, and the location of the city, which had been among the grandest in the entire world, was forgotten. And so Zin, or what remained of him, was left to fester in his madness. The concluding volume of Shattered Star begins when the Sihedron heroes return to Magnamar and present their collected shards of the Sihedron to Sheila Hydemarch. Hydemarch, eager to assemble the tool which will defend Varisia from future threats, but also aware of the importance of local politics, organizes a public festival to celebrate the event. The heroes are brought to the top of the Ire Span, and with Sheila they begin the ritual to reassemble the Sihedron. As the 7 fragments of metal are brought together for the first time in 10 millennia, a shining pillar of light erupts from them. The Sihedron is reforged. After a brief moment of celebration, however, the heroes make a horrific observation. Far to the northwest, dark clouds are forming over the sea. Beneath their feet, the Ire Span rumbles as an enormous, spider-like monster is awoken by the magic emitted from the Sihedron. The gathered crowds panic and flee at this development. Even as the heroes defeat this foe, however, Magnamar's troubles continue. A massive earthquake rocks the foundations of the city, and only minutes later, a towering tsunami slams into the entire Lost Coast. Magnamar is devastated by the surge of water, but what follows is, in many ways, worse. Clockwork leviathans emerge from the risen waters, coming from somewhere to the west. They attack the city, and only the swift actions of the heroes prevent them from going on an unchecked rampage. After a fearsome series of battles in the streets and harbors of Magnamar, the heroes finally take a moment to regroup. They realize, with the help of Hydemarch, that the tsunami and the level of sophistication of the constructs indicate the possible return of the sunken Isle of Sin, and maybe even the return of the first king himself. Now burdened by the tragedy which their own actions may have brought about, the heroes travel west across the Varisian Gulf in search of their destiny. The Isle of Sin, they discover, has indeed returned to the surface, but its former grandeur, once legendary, has faded in the millennia since Earthfall, though not nearly as much as it should have. Though much of the capital city has rotted away or become overgrown by the flora of the sea floor, the Crystal Palace, the home of Sin, remains largely intact, if severely damaged in a few notable areas. Entering the palace, the heroes are confronted by none other than Sin himself, or at least the remains of his spirit. Zin's ghost, driven by his lingering outrage at the insolence of his treacherous apprentices, has infused the entire crystalline structure, and hounds the heroes throughout their entire exploration of the fortress. As they advance through the palace, the heroes confront a number of notable threats, including Zin's own bound Axiomite chamberlains and a group of ancient aboleths, one of whom is Ogonthun, the very being who gifted Zin with the Crystal Palace in the first place. Alongside these more distinctive encounters, the heroes also defeat a large number of incredibly powerful clockwork constructs, whom they eventually discover are just a small portion of the vast army of soldiers which Zin has prepared for his eventual return to the realm of the living. Zin, whose spirit has been slowly reactivating the mechanisms of the palace, has been hard at work reconstructing the clockwork reliquary, the mechanical body he'd designed as the perfect shell for his soul. Advancing further, the heroes begin to encounter visions from the past, lingering glimpses into history provided by the infusion of Zin's own spirit into the palace walls. This offers the heroes the most thorough view anyone ever had of Zin's life and his final days. These visions conclude with a confrontation with an undead Shastak, the mighty rune giant assassin sent by the Rune Lords more than 10,000 years ago. The final confrontation in Shattered Star begins as the Sihedron heroes step into the heart of Zin's forge at the pinnacle of the Crystal Palace. There, they gaze upon a horror never before seen, the Clockwork Reliquary, now fully repaired and inhabited by Zin's soul. Mustering the full power of the reconstructed Sihedron, the heroes do battle against the legendary First King, once the mightiest wizard in all of history. But Zin, despite all his personal might, is defeated, in large part by his own philosophy and discoveries. In his prime, Zin had never been a selfish man. He was self-centered and arrogant, but he never intended to rule as the sole power in the world. In developing the Sihedron artifact, he always intended it to be a tool used by him in conjunction with his friends and allies, the 7 apprentices who helped him forge the device in the first place. By working together as a team and sharing the power of the Sihedron, the heroes proved the power in Zin's original intentions, and shone a light upon the weakness and corruption of what the undead Wizard King had become, even before his death. Zin, the first king of Thassilon and the founder of rune magic, died once and for all at the hands of the Sihedron heroes, within the heart of his crystal palace. The power of his clockwork reliquary had been unable to make up for the fear and desperation which had overtaken his mind. The heroes then return to Magnamar. Their greatest foe, and the greatest threat Varisia had seen in thousands of years, had been vanquished. But the road to recovery for their home city would be long and arduous. With the Sihedron in their possession, however, Varisia now had an impressive tool ready to fight off any more emerging threats from the ancient past. And that is what happened in Shattered Star. Now, you might be wondering, wait, the heroes have the Sihedron. Why does Return of the Rune Lords even happen if the good guys are so well equipped? That's a good question. Stay tuned to this channel for the 3rd chapter in the saga of the Rune Lords. Return is an absolutely wild ride, and my personal favorite of the main trilogy of Rune Lord APs. If the story I've covered in this video sounds fun to you, I encourage you to check out the Shattered Star adventure path. It's a really fun campaign, particularly if you want to experience some interesting and challenging dungeon crawls. This definitely feels the most episodic of the Rune Lord series, but that's entirely intentional, and it does a great job of taking the players to a wide variety of locales and allowing them to meet a wide variety of people. Thanks for watching, and I wish you all a merry little Sinmas.